Testing, testing. Take three. Hello. This morning I will be talking about the direction in which our country is going in relation to certain prophecies and apparitions of Our Lady, the Virgin Mary, in particular the Fatima prophecies, and how this gives us some indication of what we need to do as a nation to bring about peace and security. So, just to summarize, the Fatima prophecies back in 1917, Our Lady basically said that we had to get back to prayer and doing works of penance, reparation for sin, and show more reverence to her Son, Jesus Christ, in the Blessed Sacrament of the Eucharist. And if not, then Russia would spread errors throughout the world, and there would be more wars. But then ultimately there would be victory. Our Lady's Immaculate Heart triumphs. Now, it's a mistake to believe that this has all been fulfilled to this day, because there is still much more work to be done in terms of this prayer and reparation, returning to God through the process of conversion. So now, more recently, there were events that occurred in Spain where Our Lady appeared to 4 girls. It was a rather remote area, small village, and with a simple lifestyle. And these girls went into ecstasy on several occasions. But this was during the time when John F. Kennedy was president, when he just began his presidency in January of 1961, until he was assassinated in November of 1963. It was within that time frame that Our Lady appeared and made these requests or statements to the 3 girls in regard to the prophecy for what might happen. So, to summarize, there were basically 3 events that could happen, and I would like to emphasize also that the message is basically the same as in all of these apparitions, basically returning to God through prayer and penance and showing more reverence to Christ. Okay, so now the 3 events then, okay, we can, to summarize, it was basically a warning event for all the world to see, to know what's going on with their own lives in terms of their own sins, what needs to be done to change. Then there would be a miracle to sort of confirm that, to show that God is serious about this. And then the 3rd event would be chastisement or punishment, which would take place. Now, the interesting thing was that the miraculous event was to come within 1 year after the warning. So, to begin with, my particular interpretation of this, because these particular apparitions have not been approved by the Church formally, although they also have not been condemned. So there's nothing contrary to what Christ teaches in terms of these particular prophecies. But my interpretation is that the miracle ties in with Fatima in a very special way, because what happened in 1981, on May 15th, there was an assassination attempt in Rome against Pope John Paul II. Now, the assassin was an expert marksman. Apparently, he was working for the Soviet Communist intelligence. And the whole point was to put the Pope out of the way, because he was supporting the Solidarity movement in Poland, which was viewed by the Russian communists as a threat to their system of government. And rightly so. So in any event, the miracle was that the assassination attempt failed, that the Pope did survive, and there are scientific facts that are rather interesting. I won't go into the details, but how the particular bullet that struck the Pope did not reach his vital organs, which would have caused death immediately, rather, and how he spent much time in the hospital and the events that occurred during his recovery. So we'll take that as the miraculous event, which Our Lady had said was coming way back in 1961. We're talking about 20 years later, in 1981. Then we go back within a year before that. So actually, in March of that same year, Ronald Reagan had just taken office in January of 1981, and there was an assassination attempt against him in Washington, D.C. So this would be one of the major events that would be within that 1 year time window before the miracle occurred, which could then tell us that this was the warning event, because to me it had a very shattering impact on my life. I know that, because the effect of America in terms of world culture is to this day, and was at that time probably even to a greater extent, so great in terms of the fact that so much was dependent on America at that time to keep the Pax Americana, or however you want to look at it. And so when this event occurred, okay, now the description in the prophecy was that it would be like two stars colliding in the sky that everybody would see. Okay, now we'd have to look at this in more of a metaphorical sense, and looking at, because we know that the assassin there, John David Hinckley, his family was closely connected in Texas with the Bush family, and that the assassin there had actually had shared a dinner with some of George Bush Sr.'s sons, at least one or two of the sons, on the day, on the weeks or so before this assassination occurred. So to that extent, we can look at, especially in light of the Kennedy assassination, we can look at this as a collision of two stars, two powerful figures, where one faction was trying to get rid of the other faction, just as during Kennedy's assassination. We now know that George H.W. Bush, George Bush Sr., was in Dallas at that time and played a key role in the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy in 1963 in Dealey Plaza. So, in any event, that's what I would then consider the warning event. And now the punishment was actually conditional on whether people actually sufficiently made reparations for sins and gone through the conversion process, which is a difficult process to change their lives, to be open to Jesus Christ. And if that didn't happen, or if the warning was ignored or not responded to properly, well, there would be a punishment event. So we see that after this assassination attempt, Bush then served as president for 2 terms with, Ronald Reagan served for 2 terms with Bush as vice president. So Bush was serving these 2 terms as vice president, and then we had the Clintons after that, 8 more years, and then we have Bush's son in the year 2000 being elected, George W. Bush being elected president. So we're now back again to the Bush, which you might consider the star that was on the opposite side there during the Kennedy and Reagan assassinations. Okay, now we see an event occurred early in his presidency, and he took office in January of 2001, and then on September 11th, we had a very serious attack against the United States, which I would consider the beginning, one might say, of this punishment or chastisement event, which is still going on today because we still see much terrorism going on, which we didn't really see much of before 2001. I was actually very shocked when I heard on the weekend before this terrorist attack, when I heard of suicide bombings going on in Palestine, because that was such an unusual thing to me and unexpected that would happen. So it actually worried me very much right before this particular event occurred on September 11th. Now we can also go back and look at who was actually thought of as being responsible. Well, we have the same individuals, a terrorist, many of them, like Ramsey Youssef as MKL, who were involved in a second assassination attempt against John Paul II, which occurred in the Philippines, where the plan was to shoot down the airplane, and then use that killing of the Pope as a distraction. Now, this was, of course, during the time that the Pope was visiting the Philippines, and use that as a distraction to engage in more terrorist activity. But that was basically thwarted because there was an unexpected fire which occurred, and that allowed the Philippine police forces to find out who was actually responsible for that planned attack, which never actually did occur. But in actuality, we see from the scientific evidence that the plane crashes really didn't play a role in the September 11th events. It was more of an inside job, and we know that the Saudis, that 9 of the so-called terrorist hijackers, which probably they actually never actually got on planes, but these people were sent over, that they were from Saudi Arabia, but yes, the Saudi government or anything was never held accountable. So we see that this particular event of punishment or disorder, chaos in the world, chastisement, was simply blamed on certain Islamic fundamentalist forces who actually didn't play much of a role. It was simply an inside job by the American elites, certain elements in the American elites, the government, and as well as multinational corporate individuals, wealthy individuals, powerful individuals, to basically trick the American people. And this is the nature then of the punishment. It involves this trickery in the form of terrorism, which we see has sort of sprung up after 2000 and continues to this very day. Of course, it caused much disorganization and disorder throughout the world, much suffering throughout the world, in these wars that have been initiated, particularly by the United States. And we're looking to the future now, where there are plans already in effect of Israel starting a war against Iran. Now, this is something that we must pray about, because this is something where we can actually go beyond that by converting our own lives and asking Jesus for some solution to this, which won't involve another war, another devastating war. We've had enough of that already. So thank you for listening, and